Have a family meeting beforehand, set those expectations off, plan activities that are going to allow you to disconnect from it, and then discuss those things and see if there's other things that are going on. Those are 3 ways that you can begin this journey.
Welcome back to the Generation Youth Podcast. I am your co-host today. My name is Melissa McLamb, and I'm here with my husband, James McLamb, and founder of Generation Youth. And today we are diving into a very timely topic because we are at the beginning of summer and families are taking vacations together. And we're going to be talking today about how to create a mindful, tech-free family vacation.
Now, one reason why we wanted to talk about this topic today is if you can see us, if you go to YouTube and see us, you'll see in the background, we're actually on vacation ourselves. And as we were talking about this, we decided to take a pause of the interviews that we're doing and tackle this subject because it's just something that came to mind as we have been discussing it quite a bit. So I'm thankful that Melissa's here with me today and eager to dive into this topic.
Absolutely. So are you ready to get started?
I'm ready to get started. Throw some questions at me and I'll see what we got.
Okay. So let's kick things off by talking about how technology is impacting our teens negatively.
I think something that most parents can see, especially when it comes to working on vacations, technology is really great, but it does have a significant amount of drawbacks. It can consume a young person's mind to the point that they're going to miss out on the experience of being on vacation around them. A study in 2023 recently found, and I want to make sure I get this right, that teens are spending an average of 7 hours a day on screens. 7 hours a day on screen time. Now imagine trying to bond as a family and trying to grow that summer experience into something positive when they're glued to their screens. It's just immense what can happen. So screen time needs to be addressed at the beginning of a vacation.
That's a staggering amount of time.
It is a lot of time. And we've seen that with our own kids. We've had to be intentional on saying you need to get away from that.
Yes. So can you share a story or an example of someone that you have, had a personal connection with through Generation Youth that has dealt with this?
Well, one of our listeners of the Generation Youth podcast and a follower for us on Instagram reached out to us to share this story. And she shared a story about taking a family trip. And when they went out to the western part of the United States, and the particular time that they were there, they were at the Grand Canyon. And they wanted to have a once in a lifetime experience of seeing the Grand Canyon and seeing the sunset over this. And they realized that their teenage son during that trip spent most of his time on his phone, whether it was connecting with friends through social media or scrolling mindlessly through these different apps. And he missed out on the breathtaking views, a lot of things, and the family moments. It was a real eye-opener for them as they spent all this time planning this trip, hoping for these memories, because for them, they remember these types of trips when they were young and they wanted to have these experiences with their children, and it didn't happen. So they realized they needed to set boundaries to truly enjoy their time together.
Wow. And you put all that time into it.
Yeah, I know. And a lot of money too in that experience.
So let's switch gears and talk about the positive side or the benefits of technology and learning how to unplug from technology and practice that mindfulness while you're on vacation as a family.
Well, unplugging from technology can have significant benefits. For one, it helps reduce stress. It has been shown in studies that an excessive amount of time on devices, on smartphones, increase the stress in others when they're constantly connected. They're also constantly comparing themselves to others. It can negatively impact their self-esteem. We've talked about that before on the show. We're going to talk about that more on the show and through a lot of the things that we're doing in Generation Youth, because it's such an important thing. Disconnect them gives them a break from this constant pressure. And it helps them practice mindfulness, being in the moment and enjoying those things around them. We used to have an outdoor program through Generation Youth which we would take youth up on a backpacking program. And this was probably 7 years ago. So we really were just beginning to understand the negative impacts of smartphones and technology, but we didn't know to the level that we did now. And we had a lot of discussions, I remember very distinctly, me and the staff, on whether or not we should allow participants to take their smartphones with them on the backpacking trip. We wanted them to unplug from technology, but we also wanted them to have a chance, because we knew that they were going to take pictures of it, to be able to have mementos of that. So the very first time that we went out there, they used their phones. The staff came back and said that was a terrible idea. They were constantly, when we would take a break, they were popping those things out. And even if we didn't checking to see if we had signal, and it would frustrate them if they didn't. So the second time we did it, we started telling them, no, they had to leave their phones here. They had to leave them in the base camp. And the only person would have it would be our staff, and that our staff would take millions of photos for them. And then we would put them in a Dropbox for them to see. And that created a better environment for them all the way around. So if you want to be able to truly connect with your young person, you need to be able to allow them that time to disconnect, just to share stories, create memories without the distractions of these smartphone screens.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I forgot all about you guys testing from 1 year to the next. And I know that a lot of churches have to do that on
It wasn't even
campus.
1 year to the next. It was 1 week to the next. The first year when we did the 2
Oh,
back-to-back weeks,
wow.
we changed it in the middle of it. We changed the policy in the middle of it.
Wow. So do you have another example of maybe a family and how they practiced mindfully being present during family vacation using something similar?
Well, this is not something that came to us from Generation Youth, but this is a family that we both know that took a tech-free summer vacation to the beach, where they spent their days swimming, building sandcastles, having conversations, playing games together at night. The teens initially resisted the ideas. They fought it. They were young teenagers at the time, so they were 13, 14 years old, 15 years old, which, as we're learning now, is really too young to have a lot of the apps and stuff anyway. But we didn't know this at that time. But they resisted this, but they ended up loving it. They felt more connected to each other, more connected to the surroundings and families. I know another family, a good friend of mine, and I hope a viewer and listener of this show, Mark Tim. The Tims had 6 children, and they took a RV trip across the nation. They started in Indiana, went west, and did a big circle and came all the way back home, hitting west, south, southeast, up into Pennsylvania, and then back into Indiana. And one of the things that Mark told me was that he purposely kept his children off their phones. And they were, I think the oldest was late teens, almost 20, and the youngest was still in single digits. And so they purposely kept them off and only allowed them 30 minutes to an hour a day to be able to have that connection to this. And he said, they were gone a month. And he says after the first week, they stopped even wanting the phones because it was no longer an issue to them. They wanted to connect with each other more.
Wow, that's such a great example. All right, let's get into the nitty gritty of how you practice these tips for parents to be able to plan a tech-free moment and activities with their families.
Well, some of the things we're going to talk about is going to be from trial and error for us. So the number one thing that you need to do, I feel like is primary, is setting this expectation well before the trip. Don't fall into the trap that we have before of waiting until the trip is started or it's about to happen and then spring that on them. That's not going to work. That's not going to work at all. But setting the expectation beforehand, hey guys, we're going to disconnect from our phones. We're going to only spend about an hour a day going on those apps. And that's hard for us as well as parents to do. So we had to model that as well. So we had to set the expectation, have a family meeting beforehand to discuss those things, plan activities that purposely allow you to disconnect. We do a lot of hiking when we go and stuff. We purposely go to places that allow us to experience the outdoors and that we cannot, maybe even places that we know that tech is not going to be available for them. Planning places. We do a lot of game nights at night where we play cards or games, whatever that is around, something, board games, something that's away. And we may even watch a movie together, and you might say, oh, well, that's tech, but it's still an involvement with the group, cooking together, those types of activities. Third aspect of it that you want to do is really talk about it during the process. How do you feel? How do you want to feel about these things? And ask them for ideas. They may come up with ideas on their own as well. So have a family meeting beforehand, set those expectations off, plan activities that are going to allow you to disconnect from it, and then discuss those things and see if there's other things that are going on. Those are 3 ways that you can begin this journey.
Those are amazing tips. So, what if parents need to use technology for emergencies, i.e., work or other things that come up? How do
Checking
they
medical apps.
checking medical apps? Yes, like yes. So, how do you balance that?
It's all really about moderation and having a plan. And the reason we talked about medical apps is I have an app that measures my blood glucose and it goes off quite a bit. If I don't keep it to me, I don't know where I'm at. And it helps keep me focused on these things. But you got to have a plan for these types of things. Having specific times the check in would work. Using technologies for emergencies obviously is a given, but we have to define really what an emergency is. You know, and your 15 or 16-year-old may not have an emergency that they really need to do. I need to check with my best friend to find out what they're doing. That's not an emergency. You got to lead by example on this and show your teens that you can balance the tech, being purposeful with that. So you want to kind of separate that. Like when we played games the other night, I kind of moved mine away, or I used mine just to play the music that we had in the background and would set it aside. That was the only thing that would be on it. So, and still we fail miserably a lot on that, but we're trying to connect with that and discuss it. So it's really about moderation if you have to use it. I understand some have to use it for work, but especially if you're out and about, you don't want to be all on different screens all the time. So
Yes, so that totally makes sense. So let's talk about some specific tech-free activities that families can do together.
well, you got anyone that comes to your mind immediately while I'm thinking through?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on location.
Oh, very good.
Like we have done beach trips. You can't really look at screens very well at the beach. So I think that's a great way to leave the screens at the beach house and just enjoy the beach.
Especially because you want to keep them clean, and it's hard to keep anything.
Yes, at the beach,
Yeah.
it's hard to keep anything clean. Amusement parks, I think that it's safest to not have the devices with you.
Problem is with a lot of those parts, they require you to have those.
Yeah.
So that may be something you have to plan.
Yeah.
Nature hikes, we talked about that earlier. We do a lot of hiking. We love to go to the mountains. That's where we are when we're recording this, and we went on a hike today, actually. So, want to have those types together. Cooking together. We try to do at least one big meal during our time together. We typically do a breakfast because that's kind of our big thing. It's not like early in the morning breakfast, but breakfast foods. Campfire times, if there's an opportunity to have that, that's always a positive that you can do that. If you're somewhere where you can get out at night, enjoy nature, we took a ATV ride last night where we got on a ATV and rode through the mountains at night, which was extremely fun to do. And there was no way that you could use your devices there. So those are some of the things. If you guys know or some others, send them to us. Put them in the comments and the notes. We'd love to hear.
Concerts. If you have a concert
yeah.
experience and they're having food trucks, go enjoy the food beforehand, go to the concert, and just encourage your kids to be in the moment and not on a device.
Right. Very much so. Yeah. And board games, we mentioned that as well. Any kind of games like that is always kind of a meaningful way.
All right, so let's go deeper into balancing the screen time and the family time. So, other strategies that we've seen parents use to achieve this balance. We've named a bunch already, but what else have you heard from other viewers?
Well, there are several organizations and several people who specialize in talking about screen time and moderation with families and youth. And one of the things that they have taught me and have told me that is they find is a very, very effective strategy is to create a family screen time agreement. That can be as formal as having a written agreement that they sign. If that works for your family, if that's what it needs to be, then you need to do it. And if you want examples of that, you can Google it online. You can easily find screen time agreement. But this is This is an agreement, a contract that kind of outlines what's acceptable screen time uses, what's the consequences for those overuse, especially when they are first getting their phones, what is used, encouraging everyone to agree upon those, which means you have to agree upon those. Dads, you're going to have to learn how to get off the screen, the phone, and checking your messages for work or, what your stock tips are or something like that. Only using technology wisely is another effective strategy. Necessary tasks like navigation, educational purposes. That is something that's very acceptably done in ours. We use them all the time for navigation. How do we get from here to there? And for educational purposes, we'll run up to something and we'll be like, well, what's this? Does anybody know what this is? Hey, can you check this out for me and tell me what it is? Yeah, here's what I find out. Oh, wow. So it adds to it. Okay, that's a key word. If you're using technology to add to the experience of your family and it's not distracting from it or taken away from it, then it might be something that you could use.
That's a really good point. Okay. So how can parents ensure, that these strategies are effective and that teenagers adhere to them?
Well, consistency, communication. Like I said before, don't be like the McLambs and wait until the last minute to spring these things on. You got to do it beforehand. You got to consistently enforce the agreed upon rules, leading by example. You got to follow the rules just like they do. It's important to have regular check-ins with them to discuss how the plan's working. It may have to be a point in time where it's so severe where you say, all right, this is the device table. We're going to put all our devices on the table and nobody gets to touch these for, this set period of time. So you're going to have to think about those things. You want them to have ownership in the process. So while you're creating this agreement, invite them into this process. That'll make sure it's more effective. If they have agency into decision making, if they said, hey, dad, hey, mom, I think we should be able to have them only for 30 minutes instead of the hour and a half that you did, then, that's going to build something that they bought into because they helped decide what's going on. And I guarantee you, Dad, I guarantee you, Mom, you're going to be surprised, extremely surprised on how willing they are to create an environment that they're going to pull away from if they are involved with the decision making from the beginning. If it's thrust upon them for you only, they're going to push back. If you invite them into the process of creating these types of agreement, they will shock you on how much they will respond to it.
Okay, so can you share an example of a family who's done this other than we've tried? We have tried. Another family who's successfully balanced screen time on their vacation.
Well, one family that we both know very well, and I won't mention who they are, but one family we know very well, a trip to a very large national park. And what they chose to do while they were there was have tech-free mornings. So they spent their mornings hiking, exploring, allow for limited screen time in the afternoon. And then in the evenings, they were able to also do family time. So mornings tech-free, afternoon 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it was that they agreed upon. And then the evening, family time, game time, bonding time. They even put together puzzles, which, would just bore me to death. But for some people, that's really good. I'm excited for you that you want to do this. Another family, it just implemented tech-free days once a week during their vacation. That was step one for them. Today, no one touches their phones at all. Today, no one does anything with a device at all. We're not even going to look at TVs today. We're not going to do anything. And they use this day to engage in a number of outdoor activities. They cooked meals together. They had conversations. They built those types of things. Taking intentional breaks from technology helped them. Remember back when you were young, what were the things that you remember most from your family vacations that were a time? For me, a lot of times it was fishing with my parents out at the beach or in the mountains and stuff. It may have been, driving along scenic parkways and seeing scenery and getting out and taking that arbitrary picture and stuff, which was not technology like it is then. It was, the old Polaroid or film cameras.
Yes. All right. So to wrap up, this has really been encouraging and these are great stories. So do you have any final thoughts for listeners?
Look, guys, I really encourage you to take mindful, first steps in planning a vacation is very mindful, a tech-free vacation. The benefits are going to be overwhelming. You're only going to have these opportunities for these full family vacations at a limited time. And if you're having to battle with them, using technology and it is creating in them some other types of problems that may be working with self-esteem or relationships or whatever, it's hurting those aspects of them. You can take a vacation for help them to reboot, really reset their lives in a better way. So we want to set this up, but start small. Dads, don't get all gung-ho when you hear this and say, hey, family, we're going to go on a tech-free vacation. We're leaving all the phones in the cars every day or in the rooms, and you're going to get a lot of pushback.
Yeah.
So start small, set very realistic goals, invite your children into the process of establishing what these agreements are, have a time to discuss them amongst themselves, and then be consistent. Don't get excited one day about it, and then the next day, well, yeah, it's not that big a deal that they got them popped out as we're eating this meal and everybody's staring at their phone or something. We want to be with it.
And really, that's like the best way to start. It's just saying we're going to have a tech-free meal time every single time, especially when you go out to eat.
Yeah, especially when you got to eat, because that's where it seems to happen the most is people pop up their phones and have those conversations. And then don't be afraid to adjust your plan if you need to. And again, I cannot stress it enough. Involve your children in the process. If they have buy-in, if they have agency in this, if they have ownership in this, it is going to go so much easier for you than if you just come in and level the boom and say, this is what we're going to do. Start small. Involve them in the process. Set realistic goals. Communicate, and be consistent. And I promise you'll see some benefits of this. I promise you that.
All right.
You don't want to be taking a family trip to Europe if that's what you can do, and the whole time your daughters or sons are taking selfies of themselves and missing the opportunity to bond with each other.
Yes.
And I mean, do you have any thoughts on this? Any thoughts that you have?
No, I think starting small and being consistent and being intentional about when you're going to use technology and when you're going to be off of technology is super important, and establishing that before you leave.
And you don't want to be the family that looks back and say, we don't even remember the vacation. We all know that we remember more the experiences of growing up than we do the gifts that we got growing up. If we do remember a gift, it's because of the experiences that surrounded that gift. So I remember more about the vacations, about where we went, what we did, how we interacted, than I do, the gifts that I may have gotten at Christmas or even my birthday. I only remember a couple of those at this point in time, but those experiences on vacations. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of driven where we went, was our experiences growing up drove us to do the things that we do now with our children. You want that to be their experience as well. You want them to have that same kind of life. So take time to do this. Tech free. You got to have it.
Yeah. And we know it's a struggle, but it will pay off. All right. Thanks for allowing me, James, to be a part of this episode today. Hopefully some of these strategies, insights, tips will help you in planning your tech-free family vacation. And we want to hear from you. So make sure that if you enjoyed this podcast, that you share it on social media, all the different channels, and share it to your stories, tag Generation Youth. Let us hear your thoughts. Maybe you have some that we didn't share today.
And we hope this really has been insightful for you, maybe giving you some tips to help you. A little bit different podcast than we normally do, but we really thought this might be helpful and beneficial as we go forward. Make sure that you do share. That's the most important thing. So like, share, and comment, but share. Someone you know needs to hear this episode and needs to have these tips. So let's have a discussion about it. Share about this. Thank you for joining us. Thanks, Melissa, for being a guest host today. We'll be back again next week with a special guest as we start to wrap up the summer season of the Generation Youth Podcast. But thank you, audience, and we'll see you again very soon on the Generation Youth Podcast.